I started playing MLB the Show back in MLB the Show 21, and ever since then, the Pirates have always been, a solid rebuild team. And in terms of their offense, it's been three players that they had to kind of build around, and that was Oneil Cruz, that was Brian Reynolds, and that was Brian Hayes. This trio is not as young as they once were, with Reynolds in his 30s, Hayes about to get there, and Oneil Cruz now at 27, nearing his potential. And so far in this series, they have been a disappointment. The next era of Pirates offense is nearing, and it is coming very quickly. Starting with the last year's class, headlined by David Yan, who has already earned a promotion up to AAA, where he has continued to hit extremely well, and he has good defense to boot. With players like Albert Sweeney also already making the trip up to AAA. A well-rounded player with some upside. A Buford Kingman, who at 22 years old offers a good arm out in the outfield and some potential as a hitter as well, with some good clutch vision and hitting versus lefties. And then on top of that, you add this year's draft class, which is headlined by Billy Fink, projected to be the face of the Pirates offense for years to come. With two more outfielders being put into the mix that offer very intriguing skill sets, both on offense and defense. There are a lot of young guys over the next couple of seasons that will be making their Pirates debuts and will be the core of the next era of the Pirates offense. And it is now time to really start to make decisions on whether the old core meshes well with the new one. Are we getting enough production to count on Oneil Cruz, to count on Brian Reynolds, who is starting to regress, or will be close to starting to regress, at least, in Brian Hayes, who offers that Gold Glove level defense, but hasn't hit 700 in his OPS since 2023, and is under 600 this year. I need to get as much information as I can so that maybe as soon as this offseason, we can start to make some decisions on this big three as to whether or not we should include them in our plans involving our young upcoming core. Let's start with Oneil Cruz, who I think is the most difficult of the conversations to have of the three guys. He's the only one that's not under contract. So he's the only one that we're in danger of just losing without getting anything in return in free agency. He's also the youngest and the highest overall. I've said it a couple of times already, but, way back in episode 1, he was the guy after Paul Skenes that I was most excited to have here for this rebuild, and has not been what I wanted him to be yet. I have kind of just marked off in my head automatically that, Oneil Cruz is our center fielder of the future, but I'm not so sure that should be something that I'm doing. We have arbitration for this upcoming offseason. We have arbitration the year after. But then he's just a free agent. And so do we stick it out with him in hopes that he'll turn it around? Probably next season is going to be kind of the now or never for Oneil Cruz, if I'm being honest. Last season, he turned things up at the end of it. As you saw here at the beginning of this game, he is also on a hot streak, which he's continued in this game, by the way. 3 straight doubles. My goodness, Oneil Cruz. what a start. I mean, if he's looking to convince me to keep him around, this game is doing a good job of it because I'm rooting for the kid. You know, I'm not coming into this episode about these three guys trying to convince you or me or anyone to move off of these guys. I'm still rooting for all three of these guys, honestly. You know, the best case scenario for me at the start of this rebuild was that these three guys, somehow we can pan out and Reynolds can have some longevity and we would have this Pirates core to build around. You know, Tamar Johnson would eventually come up and whoever we drafted from there on. But there's a chance we end up going 0 for 3 instead. I think I still don't want to give up on Oneil Cruz. I mean, I don't know if it's just that size, athleticism combination that is so hard to quit. You know, obviously with us being in August, it's not a guy that we're going to trade this season. The trade deadline has passed. But it becomes a real conversation, I think, as soon as next year. Next offseason is impossible unless we get him to sign early on in the offseason and then deal him afterwards. But that's not, I don't think, really in my plans at the moment. I think if I had to lean a certain way at this very moment, it would be to just get him on that arbitration deal this year and then give him pretty much the now or nothing year next year. And if it's not working out, we move him at the trade deadline. I don't know how much value he's going to have at that point because that'd be a few years in a row of not excellent production. His final production at the end of last year ended up looking good because he, again, went on that hot streak down the stretch of the year. Hopefully he could just do that again this year, honestly. I would love that if he could repeat that again this year, end up with an OPS in the mid-700s like he ended up with. It's gotten over 700. It was under at the start of this episode, but back-to-back multi-hit games, and he's over 700. And now if he can get that up above 750, okay. What are you asking for at that point? If it's reasonable and we can kind of maybe take the money that we have in Brian Reynolds, and it'll be a little bit more expensive than that just because of the nature of increased contracts in this game, which I like, by the way, a lot. But can it be somewhere in that ballpark to re-sign him? If he can at least get back-to-back, you know, around the mid-700s, that's something that you can try and project forward. It's still risky because he's gone on some stretches where he's well below 700 OPS in both of these seasons so far. He's been a hot and cold player. Do you bet on that player becoming more consistent? If you're wondering what he would ask for, right now, a 5-year contract for Oneil Cruz, he's asking for $20 million, but he has like max interest in that, so you could easily get him for under. I'm pretty sure he would accept $19 million a year for 5 years as well. That would get him, you know, into his 30s. So I think 5 years is a pretty solid year amount, and he might even accept $18 million a year. But again, last year with Skenes, we waited till the offseason and it rose by $5 million. So I don't know if you're getting the same contract in the offseason. And I need to see more from him to end the season before I'm willing to give it to him right now. So it might be a moot point altogether. Moving on to the second player here, and that is Brian Reynolds. I think out of the three players that we're going to discuss in depth here today, he is the one who has been the best. He's had the most production. He's played better. He's had the best bat, however you want to describe it. But he's also the one that is unfortunately playing against Father Time, who is in fact undefeated. Every now and then you get a player who can have a solid run against him, but eventually it comes for everybody. Now, it's not like I'm not talking about Brian Reynolds at 34 years old. He's 31, all right? 31 can be worked with. He's right in that spot where it's tough because we could be really good when he's like 33 or 34. Those could be years that I think Pittsburgh has a chance at least to be contending for a World Series. And in this game, I think it's less predictable. I don't know if anybody has like a 100% accurate progression and regression formula for this game. I know they tweaked it for this game. But if you could tell me that he's not going to be regressing until he's, 36, I'd be down for a Brian Reynolds. But do we trade him to a team while he still has some value? As we take a quick break here on the Brian Reynolds clips to give a shout out to Jared Jones for having a good pitching game last time out. But do we take advantage of it while he still has value is really the question. Or do we think he's going to be one of the guys playing for us and contributing for us a good bat in 2 years? My concern with Reynolds is less about his ability to perform as it is about how his timeline matches up with the timeline that we have now started to build over the first couple of draft periods. A lot of the guys that we drafted, honestly, aren't going to take all that long. Other than like Pete Good, I don't think there's anybody that we project to have drafted with like actual potential that we're banking on that'll take more than 3 years in the minors. You know what I'm saying? Pete Good's the only kind of long-term guy that we might need a stopgap from. And that's a pitcher, where we're already more well off at the pitching, than we are with our hitters. So it's tough. It's kind of right on that borderline. Again, he's at 31. If he was at like 29, it'd be easy. Keep. If he was at 33, it'd be easy. Get some value for him while you can. But he's right in that area where it's tough. I could see him still being good when this team finally becomes good. And then you have a guy who's a Pirates lifer finally experiencing some success. What a good storyline that could be, He's not too expensive. He's got $13 million a year, which is great for us with a low budget. I think it's also good for his trade value. Based on what people are asking for on the trade market these days, that's a bargain contract. I mean, we almost paid Ramon Laureano. It was like, what, $2 million less, if that? Brian Reynolds is certainly a better player than that, and so some team would be willing to add a player of that caliber for a contract. I think he'd have some value. I'm not saying I'm going to go get, Julio Macias for Brian Reynolds. But that's the question we have to ask. Will he still be a contributor when this team is finally ready for his contributions, more or less? And he's not like a superstar player either, He's just a good contributing player, solid bat all around. I like a Brian Reynolds. If he was younger, this would be the easiest decision of the three for me. I also, what do you trade for? There you go. A blast over to right field from Brian here. No, I haven't been commentating too much on the actual gameplay. I've been more trying to dump my thoughts after we're nearing 2 years of a sample size with some of these guys that it's time, I think, to make the decision on. Early on in a franchise, you're okay to wait. And honestly, I think if we had less good drafts, I'd be willing to wait maybe even a season longer, give them that third season of sample size in a lot of cases. And for some, like I said with Oneil Cruz, that might just be something that we need to do anyway. Maybe that's the case for Brian Reynolds too. Maybe we just bring him back next year, see how the team is, see how he is. Seems like the boring answer, but sometimes the boring answer is the right answer. He's been playing really well here in this episode. Oneil Cruz and Brian Reynolds both doing a good job advertising for us to keep them, that's for sure. A sliding double here in the 6th inning. And it's just like, do you want to get worse? I understand he's old, but this offense is already so bad. Do we really want to get worse? Because you could argue that if we trade Oneil Cruz or Brian Hayes, that we're not actually getting worse. I think it's hard to argue that if we trade away Brian Reynolds that we're not getting worse. And when you have a player the caliber of Paul Skenes, you want to make the most of that caliber of player. You want to build good teams around him. I don't want Paul Skenes to all of a sudden be 29 and he's made the playoffs once. You know what I mean? So there is some pressure on me. I'm not saying that I want to be a World Series contender next year. I don't even know if that's possible. I don't think it is. I could have a perfect offseason. I don't think we'd be contending for the World Series next year. I'm just saying I don't think my goal is to be competitive by year 8 or year 7, like it was with the Rockies franchise last year. I think I want to make some serious progress over the next 2 seasons so that maybe even year 5 we're ready. The final conversation here is Hayes, and I think this is the simplest of the conversations because I've already given up on him being a good offensive player. I'm not even trying anymore. He's just never going to develop the bat. I've accepted that. The conversation with Hayes is we're a team that doesn't have the smallest budget in baseball, but we also don't have a big one, and he's locked up through 2030 on less than $9 million a year, and he provides elite defense. We're sticking him at the 9 spot. We already know what he is offensively. So is that something that we should value as a team? A player who's under a really nice sub-$9 million contract that does one thing at an elite level. I think a player like that has value to a lot of teams. There's a big question of whether or not we are one of those teams, though. On a team that's so starved for offense, can we afford our third baseman, which is, I feel like, a spot you can usually get offense? Can we afford to have that spot be so limited offensively? I mean, I'm not saying defense-only players don't have value at all. I just don't know if our team is ready for a defense kind of only player. There are teams out there that I think would value Hayes, much like I think they would Reynolds. You're talking about a team that already has a loaded offense, that has a high budget, and you're offering them some elite defense for under $9 million a year. I think there are teams that would take that and would give up some sort of assets. I'm not asking for the moon and stars for a Hayes, but I don't think it'd be a guy that we have to, attach a prospect to get off their salary. I don't think it's that type of trade. I think it's honestly more of like we're helping a team out by giving them somebody who's elite at something for under $9 million a year. And the question is whether or not we want to do that, or if we want the cost-controlled contract ourselves and we feel confident we can build an offense with a weaker offensive player at the third base spot. And that pretty much wraps up my thoughts here as of right now on Oneil Cruz, Brian Reynolds, and Brian Hayes. But I want to hear what your thoughts are, who we should be considering moving on from, who we should be trying to keep, trade, whatever you feel like we should be doing with these longtime Pittsburgh Pirates. We've reached the end of August here, so let's see how all these players that we talked about today are now doing. And Oneil Cruz really struggled. Like, the second we stopped watching him, he went on a cold streak, and he's down below 650 OPS right now. So after watching him, I was thinking maybe if he keeps it up, he could earn a contract. But now it's looking, I think, even less likely for him to earn anything other than just, coming back on arbitration in the offseason. And he needs a good year next year at this point to come back. I think trading Oneil Cruz at some point, not in the offseason because he won't have a contract, but next season is becoming a very real possibility for us, unfortunately. After Paul Skenes, this was the next guy on the list that I was excited to build with here in Pittsburgh. It just hasn't worked out, and with our success drafting outfielders the last couple of years, Oneil Cruz is looking like somebody that's on the way out. Brian Reynolds, up to 260 average and an OPS at 760 here. I think this is a guy who we could look to trade in the offseason. We could also bring him back. This is the one that I'm probably the least sure about. It seems like a simple answer, right? He's just too old to be part of this core. But man, with our offense struggling so much, it's hard to just get worse, without having a surefire plan in place. This is how we're going to improve it, which is why I think free agency this upcoming year is going to be so key for us. Because I'm starting to think that it's time to move on from a lot of these guys, but I don't want to just get worse. I want to know what the plan is to replace them before I just say, let's, take these players away. And Hayes still has an OPS below 600. Again, and his thing is not so much about offense, him getting that back. It's more about, do we want offense out of his spots, or do we want the cost-controlled player through 2030? What about the free agent additions, though? Have they been able to do anything positive here for the team? It looks like Castro's had a good year against righties, not so much against lefties. He has 16 home runs, which is his career high. So you love to see that. OPS at 681, though, isn't impressive by any means. It is better than last year, but not something you're going to hang your hat on by any means. So he's been okay. He's been good enough where I'm not like itching to get out of 12.2 for him next year, I guess. Ramon Laureano, he's not had a good year contact wise, just a 207 OPS all the way down below 620 here. So he's somebody that I could see maybe attaching one of those starting pitchers that has a potential, but they're like never going to get there probably, or at least not for 7-8 years or something. Attach one of those players to him and hopefully get off that salary. So maybe we can try another player here. I could see that happening in the offseason. And then how about Josh Bell, who we signed to be basically just a hitter for us. 660 OPS. Not good. We are getting 778 from Wilmer Flores, so maybe just expanding his role, but he's regressing, and so doesn't look like really the swings that we took in free agency are really helping this team much at all. Doesn't look like some of the players that we started are helping us at all either, and it's resulted in us being the second worst team in the NL. Again, this is, if you include, so we are, what is that? I just I had a little bit of a brain fart there. So yeah, so there's only one other team in the AL that's also worse than us. So we're the third worst team in baseball this year, which is absolutely crazy. Our team rank has actually gone down from what it was at the start of the year, which is not where you want it to be. I wonder if the injuries are playing any part in that. Oh, I think it's only like Andrew Heaney, so they shouldn't be playing a part of it. It is rough here. And it honestly felt like this was like August was a bad month for pitching, even more than hitting, I'd say at times. Next episode we'll be finishing off the season. I thought about just doing it here today because it's kind of a lost season, but there's a chance that we get I think an MLB debut here from Bubba Chandler. I think he's been pitching really well in AAA, and so that'll give us something to watch here in a separate episode. You know what? I'm calling an audible. We're 53 and 86. We're going to wait on the Bubba Chandler MLB debut. And I'm just going to simulate through the rest of the season here. I think we get a Ramon Laureano injury here. Let me quickly fix this. Make sure they don't call somebody up that I don't want them to. It's the annoying thing about September in this game is whenever there's an injury, you have to make sure they don't call anybody up that you don't want, because you have to have 28 people on the active roster. We only win 68 games this year. I was expecting kind of maybe like 75-ish. And so we end up about 7 games under my expectation here. And now we can go ahead and take a look kind of just at everybody's season and what it ended up being. -2 hits per game from Skenes. So he pretty much just kind of hit his ceiling. So he had to kind of go down in some things. He got better at strikeouts per 9. Better at that this year. Also better with the walks. He allowed more home runs, which is, I think, contributing to his worst numbers. Also, his whip was just up by a significant margin. So it wasn't as good of a year from Skenes coming after the contract, but obviously it's still all the confidence in the world in him. Jared Jones got some really good development this year. ERA was pretty similar, but the whip was way down, so you love to see that. The strikeout pace was up, the walks pace was down. He just struggled with home runs this year. The FIP was very, very similar. Still got +5 home runs per 9, despite that being probably his biggest weakness in pitching, though. But he's up to an 86 overall. It'll be interesting to see what we decide to do with his contract, because he hasn't quite shown, I think, the level of pitching that I want to extend him long term with. But at the same time, he's still so young with great potential that I feel like I didn't necessarily get burned last year for trying to pay guys maybe before I saw it from them in the Rockies. But I feel like I half did, you know what I mean? And so I'm trying to be more conservative this year and not pay guys early unless they show me something. Like, imagine if we paid Oneil Cruz last offseason, how disappointed we would be in him this year. And maybe you could even say the same for Jared Jones. So I want to see it. But then at some point, he's going to be a free agent, you know, which, again, if he hasn't shown it to us by the time he's a free agent, maybe it's better for us to just let him walk. But I still am hopeful for Jared Jones, obviously, in a major way. But I would have loved to seen enough here to pay him long term. Now, I've talked about how bad Johan Oviedo has been, but he ended the year pretty well to get all the way down to a 4.05 ERA. He was in the mid-5 ERAs for a while this year. He ends up actually getting a positive wins above replacement. He's probably looking to get paid off of that. I don't know if it's going to be with us. Does have one more year of arbitration. We only paid him $1 million last year, so kind of depends on what happens, I think, at free agency. We might bring him back to be the 5th pitcher. I have plans to add a pitcher for sure, though. Bailey Falter. He stepped in. He started 10 games for us because we had an injury to Heaney. Pretty good season from him. I wouldn't be opposed to bringing him back, but I still think I have my lefty sights higher for the offseason. I wouldn't mind getting somebody in the 80s as a lefty in free agency if we can help it. But if not, I wouldn't mind, again, bringing back Falter. He still has a couple years of team control left. Bubba Chandler, did they... Okay, he hasn't made his MLB debut. I thought they screwed me for a second. He's just listed as the MLB right now. Good development from him for sure. I think he's somebody that's going to have a chance to earn a spot in spring. Maybe compete with a guy like Oviedo for that last spot. We'll see what happens there, but I think he's certainly on the verge. I had to use his first minor league option this year, so I think that is a motivation for me to have him, to bring him up so we can reserve some options for him. If we have 2 of the 3 options used before he even makes his MLB debut, that can be a little bit tricky, especially because that's going to be the case for a guy like Hunter Barco, who I believe isn't quite ready yet, and Thomas Harrington. They were all Rule 5 eligible according to the game last year, so I had to add them all to the 40-man roster, and had to use their options this year for the guys that we inherited as, you know, our potential pitching prospects. Pete Good got a 3 overall bump. I was hoping for a little bit more than that, if I'm being honest. I was hoping we could maybe get him up to 65. That was Hopeful for sure, though. This is just showing his playoff stats. If this is his year-long stats, I think he did play pretty well throughout the year. He had a mid threes, kind of high threes ERA, and a whip around just under 1.2. I remember that from the last time I checked, which wasn't too long ago. Unfortunately, I simmed too far, forgot to stop so we could see everybody's minor league stats. Which is unfortunate. I wish why did they delete the minor league stats, man? It's so annoying. There's really no reason to do it. But Ray Drake went up 4 overall this year, so he'll be 59 overall heading into his age 22 season. Our only reliever with real upside here is Richard Lynn. And he got some solid development up to a 68 overall. In terms of our major league squad, let's see what they did here. We got 303 ERA, 139 whip. Whip's a little high there for Moretta. Holderman, played really well in 38 innings. 104 innings for Carmen Majinski. 370 ERA, 125 whip. Pretty solid stuff. Dennis Santana was not the man he was a year ago for us. Did not play nearly as well in the setup role as he did in the closer. He is a free agent coming up next year, and I think we're going to let him walk with that. Luis Medina. He is listed as AAA right now, but of course he was on our major league squad the whole year because he had to be. He was a Rule 5 pick. Honestly, think he was pretty good. I'm going to call that a success of a Rule 5 draft pick for sure. +7 to his walks per 9 is awesome. Bednar, how did he do as our closer this year? 41 saves to 8 blown saves. Okay. Not, the 2021 to 2023 level of David Bednar, but good enough. I think if we look at him, he's also an unrestricted free agent. Do we bring him back off of the season that he had? That is the question. Or do we look elsewhere for a closer on the squad? David Yan, really solid upgrades. Didn't upgrade his power versus lefties, but he started in a really good spot there, so it's still looking pretty good. I mean, last I checked, he had like an high 8s in his OPS at AAA. Since we brought him up again, I apologize that I forgot to stop so we could see these guys' minor league stats. I blame MLB the Show for deleting them for no reason. But really good development again for contact this year. I think he's somebody that very well could be making his MLB debut next season as a 19-year-old. Henry Davis for us, 727 OPS. And Andy Rodriguez, these guys kind of split time, and Rodriguez just underneath him there in terms of OPS. If you're looking at their team control, we have one more renewable year for Henry Davis, whereas Andy is now headed into arbitration. I like, Henry Davis has the big arm, but Rodriguez is just a better overall defensive catcher. So I think they'll probably both be on the squad again next year, but then maybe at that point, Rodriguez in his arbitration, although Henry Davis at that point will also be in arbitration. So we'll see who we end up keeping. Maybe the fact that Andy's a switch hitter gives him a leg up. Who knows? Spencer Horwitz here, -10 contact versus lefties. That's wild. Only 12 homers for us this year. OPS dropped by a full 10 points there. WAR was significantly down. Just wasn't quite the same caliber of hitter. He was very arguably our best offensive player in year one. Couldn't replicate it here in his second year. Gonzalez ends up with a really good year of development here. 14 homers, easily his career high. OPS did drop. He was on fire, up above 800 at about that midseason mark. Couldn't quite end on the same note once he got the leadoff role. I just didn't take him off the leadoff role because there's just not a good leadoff option on the entire team. Didn't know who to replace him with. Hayes. We talked about him at the end of August, so you're not going to see much of a change here, but he ends up with a 581 OPS. Just Not an offensive contributor at all. Albert Sweeney did not develop his hitting against righties all year, which, that's so unfortunate. Going to be really good against lefties. I think he has a good chance to be the platoon first baseman alongside Horowitz next year, where Horowitz hits against righties, Sweeney hits against lefties next season. I can absolutely see that being the case. I think he's ready for sure. Willie Castro ends on a hot streak. Gets up right just underneath that 700 OPS, which is like kind of the minimum standard you want. Also hit 18 homers. You know, I think for what we were getting and the price we were paying, that's a solid season. I wouldn't say he exceeded expectations, but I also can't say that I'm disappointed in a guy like Willie Castro. So I think he'll definitely be back next year on that price that we paid. 750 OPS. That's kind of like the benchmark for me. I want 750 plus. And so he hit that. For the first time since 2020, he did not hit 20 homers for us, though, despite, it wasn't injury related. He had 616 at-bats for us. Oneil Cruz. Not good. His hitting hasn't developed at all, really, in 2 years here in the franchise series. We're gonna bring it back on arbitration, but I don't know how many more games he's going to be playing in a Pittsburgh Pirates uniform at this point. I have been disappointed in Cruz. He does have, he's not a terrible player. Not trying to say that, but for the guy that from episode 1 I was hoping could be one of the faces of our offense, he was our leadoff hitter to start. I had to take him out of it because he was doing so poorly. Tough. We'll see what his future holds here. And Laureano, I think, is one that just didn't super work out, and I could see us trying to get off that 11 million. Maybe even having to get off of a prospect or two to get off of that 11 million this offseason and maybe retry at that spot in the outfield. Buford Kingman, 762 OPS. Oh no, this is it's just the playoffs, so wasn't what he hit. He got some pretty solid development across the board hitting. He didn't develop his discipline, which you don't love that. That's his plate skill that he needed to develop the most. But he got some development, especially against righties, which is what we wanted from him this year. So can't be mad at that. I can definitely see him getting the call up to AAA next season. Last thing I want to look at here. Let's go to some team rankings. Where were we in batting average? We were 24th in batting average. In terms of runs, we were 27th this season. In terms of hits, it'll be close. Doubles, not bad. Top 20 at least. Triples, we have some decent team speed, I guess. Actually, top 10 in there. Home runs, third to last there. Stolen bases, not a bad team. Stealing bases, about average there. We did well at not getting caught stealing. In terms of drawing walks, 22nd in the league. In terms of striking outs, we were not terrible. Okay. Tied for 12th. Slugging, 27th. On base percentage, 27th. How often did we ground into double plays? Not terrible there. Errors, how well did we avoid errors? Around average there. Fielding, this is just an area that I don't want to be towards the end. If we're in the middle in that area, I'm fine with that. Team ERA, 18th, which I would say is a bit of a disappointment. We have a top 10 pitching staff. Mitch Keller, I don't think we actually even talked much about him, ends up leading us in ERA for a 3.33. Complete games, there weren't really complete games around the league that many this year. The Dodgers by far with the most at 5. Saves, We know Bednar had 41. We had 46 total as a team. In terms of blowing saves, we were around average. Hits allowed. Was that where our pitching staff struggled? Not really. Top 10 there. Let's go home runs. Did we allow a lot of home runs? Yeah, I felt like our pitchers struggled allowing home runs. 25th there. In terms of walking batters, I don't feel like that was too much of a weakness for us. End up 10th there. Striking out players, 19th, which with like Skenes and Jones, I'd expect to be a little bit better there. Some of our other pitchers aren't quite as good at it, but there you have it. There's the story of the 2026 Pirates. I think a pretty disappointing season so far. I'd say right now, my rebuild, I'm not doing a good job rebuilding the Pirates. There's a lot of hope in the future. A lot of our players that we've drafted are soon to come up, and I think it'll look a lot better in future years. I got to figure out what my plan is in the offseason. Do we anticipate the players coming up? Do we try to find, a good player right now? Do we wait? Save our chips? Of course, we know we can only have 5 outside assets on the team. Surprise, surprise, the Dodgers have won the World Series again, and I keep adding things to this episode, making it longer and longer. This might be a long episode, but hey, we went 2 months into it. But I think with so much of the context about what we want to do in this offseason, being dependent on what's actually available, like I don't have a availability dependent game plan. I think what I want to do depends on what I could potentially replace people with. So it's time to get to the offseason. I'm not going to obviously do the offseason in this episode. That would be crazy. But I want to give you guys a preview of what's going to be available as we get 2 new Hall of Famers here. In terms of the 4 players that are going to be free agent eligible, I don't think we need to target any of them right now. I'm not opposed to bringing back David Bednar, but I don't think it's something that we need to prioritize right at this moment, which means we're going to let him hit the market. I want to end off this episode by taking a look at the available free agents in this offseason, getting a look at what we could potentially do and what that could mean for who we keep, who we let go, etc., etc. If you're looking at lefty pitchers, I think there are 2, maybe 3 that stand out right now. Nope, Sandoval's pitching clutch is too low. I think Nestor Cortez is an option. So I'm looking for guys that are around 20 million, I think is the max here. The absolute max. We have a budget of 45. As of right now, I'm not planning on giving out any major contracts. Obviously, stuff like arbitration is going to cut pretty heavily into this, but I also think there might be a possibility that we get off a contract or 2. So I'm thinking at least we could get 1 player at 20 million, maybe even 2, depending on what we go. But 20 million is kind of the max that I feel like I'm working with here. And there's 2 lefties. Nestor Cortez, coming off a 3.75 ERA, 1.12 WHIP season. Jesus Luzardo, coming off a 3.04, 1.20 WHIP season here. I think either of those could be good, but I want to look at the available hitters. Not super interested in catcher. A first baseman I could be convinced on. You have Ryan Mountcastle here, who's much better against lefties. I'm not sure how much I want that. Jazz Chisholm here at second base. Now, he could play third base. He has been kind of that 750 OPS player, so he's not great in the Sims so far. Consistent and be one of our best hitters. How much is he asking for? 20 million a year. So this is probably the highest overall player that we could target. What do you guys think about a Jazz Chisholm? I think he could potentially replace Brian Hayes at third base. He could also potentially replace Oneil Cruz at center field. That 74 contact versus right and 81 power versus right is a combination we don't really have. He's got good clutch. He's a good defender as well. That's intriguing to me. He's still just 29 years old. That's probably, unless I find somebody else here, the biggest ticket free agent we could probably even consider here. Alec Bohm could be another guy we could consider at third base, maybe. I've already signed Ian Happ in a previous franchise. Don't know if I want to repeat that. 30 years old, you have Dalton Varsho, but that 40 contact versus right. I'm looking for a guy that I can trust with a bat. Victor Robles could be an intriguing, maybe Ramon Laureano replacement. Costs more than Ramon Laureano, but he's a little younger, and I think he's better. Those are the free agent options here in terms of a closer that we could get instead of Bednar. Bednar's the third highest rated closer available. So if you're thinking lefty pitcher, you're probably thinking Luzardo or Cortez. If you're thinking position player, hitter, and you want to make a splash, I think Jazz Chisholm is the best option on the market. Do we want to pay that? I think it would come at the cost of getting rid of a player that we talked about early on in today's episode. But there you have it. Let me know what you think we should be doing here with kind of all these young guys set to join the team in the next year or two. I want to build a team that can complement them well. Do we make a move this offseason? A guy like Jazz Chisholm would take 2 of our 5 available outside asset spots, so it would not be cheap. Or do we stay pat, hold our cards close to the vest, and maybe go all in another year? I think there are some fun options here in free agency, and I'm down to go kind of either way with it. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next episode. Let's go Bucks.